Hey everyone, it is 7 o'clock on the dot. I know there are still people joining us, but I think we should get started in the interest of time. I'd just like to welcome everybody to the IIBA Durban Region's first Tools and Techniques class of 2022. Before we get started, I'm going to go through some housekeeping as per usual. First of all, if you could please stay on mute, keep your videos off. Only the speaker's video will be on. The presentation is 45 minutes long. Sometimes we do go over a little bit if there are a few more questions than usual, but it's generally about 45 minutes long. You can post your questions in the chat, and at the end of the presentation, we'll go through the questions with Banu. We will upload this presentation to the IIBA's YouTube page. If you want to present a tool or technique, if you'd like to speak, please get hold of me on this email address. I will drop these links into the chat for you as well. If you're interested in becoming a member, you can also go to the link to join. And speaking about becoming a member, here's a few of the benefits. You have access to the online library, which has over 11,000 titles. You will also get access to member exclusive webinars and PDF publications, articles, industry papers, and reports. Obviously, there are also lots of opportunities for you to connect with other members at local, like these, or international conferences and chapter events. You get exclusive access to the global community of BAs, educators, thought leaders, mentors, and coaches. And you also get a saving of up to 40% on globally recognized professional certifications. And there are often discounts on conferences as well. With that said, thank you very much, everyone, and I hope you enjoy the presentation. I'm going to stop sharing for a second and just do a little bit of an introduction for you to Banu. Banu has actually been with us before. I'm very happy to welcome her back this evening. Many of you will have attended her talk that she gave with us last year, so you'll know that you're in for a very engaging and interesting talk. For those of you who don't know Banu, she is an IT professional with an engineering background and experience across multiple business domains. She enjoys problem solving, mentoring, and sharing her experience through public speaking like this. Banu is also a published author, if you didn't know about that. In her spare time, she likes to learn about new cultures and arts and crafts. And that is Banu. Tonight, Banu is going to be sharing her 3 key points on how BAs can self-empower themselves as an agile mindset evolves at workplaces. Potentially, these are things we should have done before too, but it becomes even more crucial with self-managing teams. So with that said, Banu, over to you.
Thank you so much, Laura. I appreciate that. And I also appreciate the invite to have me back again. And as Laura said, I did do a class last year, which I had a blast with in terms of coming up with the content and also interacting with the audience as well. And I'm hoping that the effect would be the same this time as well. So for today, I wanted to share something that I'm personally quite passionate about, and this has been part of my growth as well in my own career. So I wanted to share some learnings that I got out of this process. And the theme is that empowerment is no longer an option. Just in today's world, I think that applies to a lot of different areas, and even in your personal life, you cannot wait for things to be handed over to you. It's all about proving yourself and showing that you are capable of doing something, and thereby taking that power back onto you. So not going into this philosophically, but focusing specifically as a BA, what are some of the things that you can do to get this empowerment back to yourself? Before I do that, I just wanted to add a bit more context into my background in case this helps you with identifying a coffee chat opportunity, or even if you have any questions about any of these domains, feel free to connect with me. I am in the product and program management area more recently, but I did start off as a developer. I've done a bit of time as a tester. Then I was a BA for the longest time. Then I pivoted slowly onto the business side, became a PO as well. And then most recently, I'm in program and product management. In terms of the domain, I've had a variety of exposure as well, been quite fortunate in that space, but primarily I focus on fintech. My background started off with engineering, but then I added on a few more tools in my toolkit as well with MBA and data analytics and marketing too. World, exposure, global exposure is key. And I think the pandemic has kind of opened up some of those avenues as well. And that's how I got in touch with Lara as well in terms of IIBA South Africa, even though I'm located in North America. And last but not the least, I truly enjoy mentorship and public speaking because this is a way that I see for my own personal growth. And I also learn from your experiences. It's a bi-directional relationship that I build with folks. So I'm happy for people to reach out to me, and I'm happy to provide my assistance wherever I can. Going into the content itself, the first question is, why do we need to empower? I know I gave a little bit of a spiel philosophically in the beginning that, you know, whatever you want to achieve, it's really up to you in terms of how you want to build your career, build your life, and steer the direction. But apart from that, when we look at the market itself and how things are changing, here are some points that I wanted to bring to you. Organizational needs are changing in general. It's not just about, you know, making a profit and staying afloat or being the most powerful company, but there are so many things outside of our control. When you think about how pandemic has changed our life in terms of how we want to work, people's mindsets have to be changed, and that the organizations have to be more mindful of and make sure that they're catering to the right set of people, having the right kind of employees in their organization for their sustainable growth. Roles themselves are evolving as well. And I think keeping in theme of what IIBA has kind of planned for this year is understanding how BAs are evolving. We cannot be doing the same things that we did 10 years ago. Technology has evolved, the needs of the role, the job, everything has changed. So understanding why you need to take that power back onto you to draft your own path forward becomes even more important. It's a hybrid working world. You have to keep changing into different environments. You might be working in a hybrid model whereby you're partly at home, partly at work. Your entire team might be offline. For example, the recent role that I started in the pandemic. So I haven't actually met anyone in person, but I still have to build those same relationships. I still have to build that trust, and all those things have to be done in a different way, not the traditional way where you could just walk by their desk and say, hey, you want to go for a coffee? We are moving into an outcome-driven world. So when we think about the kind of storm that this product management piece has kind of taken the world over with, they are more outcome-driven rather than output-driven. So understanding the value that you need to provide to people, it's not just about the tangible deliverables anymore, but it's much more than that in terms of how you make people feel. How do they value that experience? How do you define that? In with everyone has different perspective coming to the table, so now you have to talk to people from different generations. When we think about, you know, the new grads who are coming in from school, all the way up to people who are extending their retirement because of financial needs or even personal interest that they want to stay, the communication modes and channels have changed for each one of these generations, if you will. We have our own personal growth goals. We cannot be functioning the same way perhaps our parents were, our grandparents were. I still get some sass from my parents when they tell me, oh, you know, you're working too hard, you know, life, we used to be much more disciplined and this is how we got our life done. And you seem to be online all the time. So them working in their world was very different from how we work today. Yes, there are lots of good, valuable snippets that they can still provide me with, life advice and so on and so forth. But still, you can't deny the fact that the style that we have been working in the last few years have changed quite a bit, and even more drastically in the last decade or so because of the evolution with technology and the kind of environment that we are currently in. Last but not the least, along with the goals of a role itself, leadership in itself has changed. It's no longer just about the title. You could still be called a manager, but be the most crucial piece of glue that holds the entire team together. It's about the attitude that you bring in. If you follow Simon Sinek, who is one of my favorite go-to person to look at team dynamics and things like that, he always talks about the trust factor. It's not just about being the most skilled person on the team, but still be a jerk, but it's about being moderately skilled or even low skilled because the company is willing to invest in you because of your attitude and your behavior and your passion to drive the organization forward. So leadership is not just about a title anymore. So you can display traits of leadership, even though you might be a BA on the team and not necessarily have the access or empowerment provided to you by the company, but you can take this power onto yourself and chart a career for yourself. So hopefully that convinced you for the need to be empowered on your own and not rely on what the organization tells you or what your title or your job tells you. The key takeaways that I'm hoping that you guys will remember after this conversation is to have seamless curiosity if you are looking to be empowered. Understand strategic interests. So it's not just about knowing your piece of the puzzle, your tactical area, but it's also understanding the overall strategic interests. And last but not the least, do the best that you can in uniting people's passions. The team that you're working with, it's important to understand the value that they are bringing in, appreciating them for what they are bringing to the table, and therefore use that as your premise to unite them. Now, for the next little while, I'll be going a bit more deeper into each of these topics. Seamless curiosity. I've often been called someone who has FOMO, fear of missing out. And that's simply because I either put my hands into a lot of different pies at the same time, and I'm struggling a bit with, time management, or it could even be concepts where, I'm just constantly interested in what other people are doing, and I want to take a piece of everything. But it basically comes from the underlying need that I am naturally curious. I ask a lot of questions. In fact, that has driven me to one of my side passions, whereby I like talking to people, taking their interviews, coming up with questions, and people have given me feedback that I come up with really good questions. And part of it, I can attribute that to being a BA, because as a BA, you're constantly trying to find out, what is the requirement? How do I elicit that? How can I position this question differently and in a way that brings out a new perspective? How do I make this person comfortable in sharing some of this information as well, right? So when you think about some of the concepts that they cover in DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's always about making it a safe space. People should not feel vulnerable when they're answering some of these questions to you. So have that seamless curiosity. And one of the models, like when it comes to quenching your thirst for curiosity, is T-shaped skilling. What that means is basically understanding that there are a whole variety of perspectives that you can look into. So having a broad range of interest, especially when it comes to work, but choose your niche, the one that you're most passionate about, and try to drill deeper in that area and become a subject matter expert, or use that as your core specialty in terms of how you want to position yourself. But having that knowledge about what other people are doing accomplishes a lot of different things. Number one, you develop empathy. You start understanding why other people might be behaving the way they are, or why certain people focus on certain things that you don't see as important. You start understanding their drivers. What are the key drivers that will make them trust you? What are the key drivers that will make them do what you are asking them to do? How do you negotiate with them? How do you manage conflicts with them? All of these are different aspects which you can start tapping into once you broaden your horizon in terms of understanding the different aspects as well. To give you an example, within the product management profession itself, it's generally looked at a hub and spoke concept, whereby the product manager kind of sits in the center, and then they are interacting with a lot of different groups to ensure that the product that they're managing is successfully handled in a good way. So that could be marketing, legal, HR, technology, sales, support, customer support. So when you think about all these different departments that you're managing as a product manager, you are required to know their business. And that's sort of empowerment. And that's one of the key differences between being a BA and a product owner or a product manager, I think, in my opinion. So when you start making it your business to know what other people's business is in a professional way, you start becoming more approachable for the rest of your team. And naturally, they'll start looking up to you as a leader, because you understand their perspective, and you're able to show them the characteristics and goodwill that someone who wants to do good for the organization or even the department as a whole. So in this case, you will also start looking into integration insights. So as you know, what are the different components of the product that you're working with, or the solution that you're working with, having a conversation will become that much easier, because you know something that will help you peel the surface of what needs to be done. I apologize for that very loud air vehicle that's passing. So that helps you with having greater and more substantial conversations about integration itself. It also gives you an opportunity to come up with innovative examples. You don't want to be reinventing the wheel. So if you know that there's a specific database that's housed somewhere else that's providing you the data that you require for your specific solution, just imagine what that kind of insight can do to a project, the amount of time that you would be shaving off in terms of effort, the amount of money that you would be saving without recreating the same project that has been somewhere else, sitting somewhere else. So having that broad range of interest is really key in trying to understand how things can be done better, because you are no longer just siloed in your own area. But last but not the least, it's the bird's eye view and the leadership. I can't tell you how many times as a BA, I was always craving to understand, where does my piece of solution fit in the larger picture? I have primarily worked in fintech, and sometimes, and I was in the online and mobile banking space, whereby, we had our users coming into our portal, looking at their personal information for banking and finance and so on and so forth. But the number of times I wondered where that piece kind of sits in the overall strategy of the company. I was specifically catering for personal banking and consumer banking clients, but there was a lot more. Like, what are some of the features that the commercial team actually gets? What are some of the features that the trading team gets? Are there any positive aspects that I can bring over on the consumer side too? Because at the end of the day, we're trying to give them the best experience possible in the digital world and making sure that they're able to manage their finances as best as possible. So knowing that strategic positioning of where you are in light of everything else really gives you that upper hand to have more strategic discussions. And those are the discussions that leaders get into. And when you're talking to your executives and your immediate managers, or even managers above them, think about the kind of impression that you would be creating when you can talk about different things that affects them in a more logical, in a more cohesive and ecosystem type of manner, because now you're able to give them the full picture. And that's the kind of insight that leadership kind of looks for in upcoming next generation of leaders and managers as well. So hopefully that convinced you to have more curiosity and trying to understand more about what you are trying to do and where that kind of sits in the overall picture. And that kind of leads into our next piece, which is strategic interest. So in this case, again, combining concepts of empathy, combining concepts of where you are sitting in a scheme of things, learning what your boss does makes you a very good employee. It doesn't mean that you are sucking up to him, for the lack of a better term, but it really means you're understanding what are the challenges that they go through, and at your level, how are you able to counter some of those challenges? For example, if you know that your boss is, one of the responsibilities that they have is to have a weekly meeting with their boss to provide them updates about how the project is going and what needs to be done. If you have that insight and you take the proactive measure to schedule a meeting maybe a day or two before that update is supposed to take place, and you provide the update in the exact same format that your manager needs to report to his higher up, with the right level of detail, with the right level of information access, imagine how impressed your boss is going to be in terms of how easy you make their life. And eventually it would be inevitable that they will mention your good name in an executive situation as well. And people are going to be like, okay, this is not necessarily a person who's in a manager position, but they are able to anticipate what the executive team needs. And therefore, this person has a lot more potential than where they are right now. So automatically, you start creating allies for yourself. You start creating a good brand for yourself in terms of what you're able to achieve and what you're able to do beyond what your title has to offer, beyond what your current role has to offer. This also helps you learn the business. You are not just going to be in your own little silo, in your own little shell, trying to figure out what needs to be done. But if you're looking for career growth, you need to understand other parts of the business too. We have heard about a lot of these stories in the Silicon Valley about how someone started off as a developer, or someone started off as a testing analyst, or as a salesperson. And eventually over the years, they've gone up to carry the mantle of being a CEO or a board member, or holding any other important position up there where they can provide strategic insight, be the face of the brand, and so on and so forth. That is not going to be possible if you keep yourself within the shell that you're most comfortable with. So learning the business in a casual manner, it doesn't have to be forced. There are a lot of companies that offer formal ways of learning, for example, rotational programs or internships, or even secondments. So those are opportunities where you can learn some other parts of the business as well. But beyond that, what are some of the informal ways that you can learn? Understanding the annual reports and how the business is doing if it's a public company. If it's not, catching up with other members and employees in the company, going out for a coffee chat, trying to understand what they do and where they fit in the bigger picture. Even reading news articles. There's a concept called social listening, and essentially that is to summarize and create an understanding of what this brand or what this company looks like in social media. What are people saying that we're not necessarily tapping into newspapers, but then there's an informal feeling about that company when you browse through their social media channel. So understanding those concepts through social listening. All these things are going to help you build a better idea of the business that you're working with, and therefore you'll and better position to explain these things to someone coming from an executive level. Especially when you're talking about product specific focus these days, you want to go in with the idea that, hey, this is the pain point that we're trying to solve. This is the empathy that we need to focus on. This is the specific why as to what we can carve out in terms of our niche out there in the market. Because there's going to be a lot of competition regardless of which area you're in. How do you bring yourself forward? How do you make yourself look unique? These are the ways by learning more about your business. And in turn, you will also learn more about your product, because as you find those pain points out there, you'll start realizing, does my product really do this? Does my product really cater to this group of people? How can I improve the pain or remove the pain, rather, not improve, but remove the pain in terms of what they're experiencing? What are some of the new innovative ideas that I can put in as requirements, or how can I approach this perspective in a different way? Learn who your customer is as part of that, right? Once you bring in the concept of empathy, you need to understand the voice of the customer. I also have some background in Six Sigma, and the core piece that kind of drives Six Sigma is the voice of customer. What are they saying about your product? And if they tell you what that pain point is, what sort of value added activities are you doing, so that in the end, you're not spending the resources on wasteful items, but really on things that matter to the customer. And last but not the least, knowledge is powerful. It is powerful because of the context that you apply it in, the time that you apply it at, and the people that you're with, right? A lot of people think that having a lot of degrees and certificates make them powerful. It might be true, but if that knowledge is not applied at the right time in the right place, then it kind of becomes null or useless in terms of giving its maximum possible impact. So as you're learning about these different various concepts, whether that be your business, your client, your product, you start bringing in the knowledge, the theory that you have learned into practical terms as well. You start saying, oh, I learned this in my course, and this is probably where it needs to be applied. This is how it's tied. Understanding those intricacies and connections will give you a new perspective that is really, life-changing in my opinion. Because back in university, I actually did a year of internship in between my courses. I had 4 years of schooling and I did 1 year of internship. I made a conscious decision to take my internship after my third year because there were some specialized courses that I want to take. So I get an understanding of the theory. And then when I went into work for that 1 year and I came back fourth year in my university, I had seen a radical change in the way I consume information, in the way I understand information, simply because now I understood how it was being actually applied to the practical world. The power of a lot of vocational certifications that we have today is they are all focused on how you can apply it at your workplace directly. They're not theoretical in the sense, something you would study as part of research in university, and maybe you don't really know how it's applied in day-to-day work. So tap into that knowledge and make sure that you're looking at ways to apply the knowledge that you've learned in class, or at least understand how that needs to be morphed and modified when you apply it practically. So this way you're taking the power back to yourself, because now you're actively applying the knowledge that you're passionate about at your workplace and making a difference. So you're bringing that new perspective that someone else might not have thought of. And the last point that I wanted to cover was uniting people's passions. Now, you as the gatekeeper of the requirements, you as the person who knows the requirements document inside out, have access to that knowledge that a lot of people might not. Let's be honest, we do write maybe 50 or 60-page requirement documents, but there are very few people among our stakeholders who would actually read it at the same level of detail that we would. And that's just expected, it's life. Everyone has their tasks to do, and maybe reading is not their topmost priority. But guess what? Their lack of information gives you that power, because now when you want to go talk to them about specific details, when they don't really understand why they are involved in a specific project, when they don't necessarily understand why we are going through a specific feature about the product itself, when they question why some of the decisions were taken, you now have access to that information, which you can provide them in a verbal format or in a communication format that they're most comfortable with. Use that as a way to appeal to their passions, understand their drivers, understand their why, and then give them the right example or the response that is required to bring them together to work with you. And when you think about that kind of power being applied to the entire team, so the developer might have a specific perspective on the product, the tester might have a specific perspective on the product. And when you talk to them in a customized way to help them understand how they can contribute to the product, you are appealing that much more to their passions. You're appealing that much more to their interest in the product itself. And you're able to drive a team together towards a common vision or mission that you need to complete at the end of that sprint, at the end of that PI, if you're working in an Agile methodology, or at the end of that go-to-market strategy. So you have the power to bring the entire team together through your facilitation, through your stakeholder relationships, and last but not the least, through the access to the information that you have, because you know the requirements inside out. And when you're bringing together people in a harmonious way, guess what? Someone who you are reporting to, your manager, is going to start looking at, I seem to have the least amount of problems when I assign this project to this BA, because they're able to tap into a lot of positivity, and the team likes them, and they are able to deliver things. When we talk about an outcome-driven society, they're able to bring out the outcomes that are necessary to make this product successful. It's not just about the product itself, the bottom line in terms of sales and things like that, but they're actually delivering value to external clients and to internal clients. So understanding that why through the knowledge that you have about the documents puts you in a very unique position to bring your team in a united way and guiding them through knowledge rather than power, rank, or sense of responsibility, even, because now the team is passionate to follow you because you have answered all their need to follow and work through this product. So hopefully this gives you another insight into how requirements, a 50-page document can give you that power to bring the rest of your team together. And that was sort of the end of my presentation. And I know there are a few questions that came up on chat, and we can start with that. Laura, is it a good time to switch over to the questions?
Yeah, thank you very much, Banu, as always. Very interesting. A lot of that resonated really, really deeply with me. Thank you so much. I'm just checking the chat. I see a comment from Kaliswa saying, taking the power back to yourself. I'm not sure if there are any other questions. I don't see anything in the chat. So if anyone has a question for Banu, please can you post it in the chat?
Oh, gotcha. Okay. I did not have my I didn't have my chat window open, so I thought there were questions coming. Sure.
There's one there. I'm confused as to seamless curiosity. What is it?
Yeah. So seamless curiosity is specifically talking about the top line here of the T-shaped skilling, which is broad interest. And the reason I say it's seamless is because it's seamless within your area of interest, but at the same time, you should also consider what other people are interested in. So it's not just about, it's logical for us to say, hey, if I'm interested in something, I would definitely go into that and kind of investigate. But you don't necessarily think about what is the other person's interest and why does the organization want to focus on this? So often what happens is our level of curiosity and probing kind of stops where our needs and wants are met. And we don't necessarily venture further to see what else is out there, because number one, maybe it's not of interest to us. And number two, we might not care about it as much. So those two aspects, and the third thing, sorry, one more thing I want to mention is sometimes you don't know what questions you need to ask because you don't know enough about the subject. So to give you an example, I was recently working on a project which was related to payments, and I was trying to use an existing payment provider's APIs and technology architecture to effect a change for the client that I was working in, because their payments was actually not as advanced as they wanted it to be. But as part of that, some of the questions that I had to, I personally took an interest to think about was, yeah, they are working on payments today, which is related to the cash exchange that takes place. But what if they want to start getting into the digital side and start looking at NFTs and blockchain and things like that? Are we even considering some of that scalability in future? So in terms of what you want to provide your client as an insight, they might be still thinking about the short-term details, but you can actually extend their thought process to think about future aspects and what kind of values they can bring in. So that's sort of what I mean by seamless curiosity, is to push the boundaries and get outside your comfort zone, and also ask about things that might not directly pertain to you, but it does help you in understanding the entire ecosystem of what you're working with. So when I'm working with payments, the specific scope of my project was not really to go into blockchain and NFT, but I did ask the question, and that helped one of the architectural people at the client side, or on the client side, to think about, oh yeah, maybe we need to think about the infrastructure differently. And there were some slight modifications that they did in terms of the solution that they provided. So having that seamless curiosity helps you bring in some innovative ideas to the table. And it also helps you establish as someone who goes above and beyond than just the scope of information. So your client is obviously going to be more happy. So that's what I meant by seamless curiosity. And in terms of united passions, it's to bring together people's drive, to understand what drives them, because eventually, if you're just looking at a manager-employee relationship, yes, power can drive you to a certain extent. You can say that, hey, I'm your manager. I am the one who decides your bonus, so you better do this for me. But beyond that, as BAs, you don't necessarily have that power, because you probably don't have developers or testers reporting to you. You're kind of at the same level, your peer relationships. And when that happens, the only way you can really drive them forward to agree to you or to do something that is good for the project itself is to appeal to their passions and making sure that you understand what drives them, and then using that to convince them to take steps further with you. So you're bringing the entire team together to achieve a greater outcome, a better outcome than where you are today.
Thank you. Okay. Yumna has got not a question, but thank you for a great presentation. Really gave me more insights on how I can add more value and be unique in my role as a business analyst. Emilia says, you're a brilliant speaker, Banu. I agree with you. Everything made sense, and I like those ideas you shared about how we can empower or elevate ourselves to add value to our bosses, the team, and the business. No question, just thank you for sharing your insights and experience with us.
Yeah.
Then Lufuno has said, my client approved the new system we were developing, the system on testing phase. He changed his mind and says, I never needed the system. You're wasting your time. How do you deal with such a client?
That's it happens, right? And sometimes it's about finding what the root cause was. And it's not about playing the blame game necessarily, but it's really understanding what is it that you could have done differently for a better outcome over here. Was the reason that the client was not provided sufficient insight into what the system was in itself? Was there a gap in the requirements in terms of how they were captured? Was he not as involved when the requirements were being written? Was there a genuine gap in communication and so on and so forth? But every time we go through a failure such as this, I would encourage you to see this as a learning opportunity. Once you figure out what was the gap that caused this sort of an outcome, it is important to go back to the client and kind of say that, hey, no one was willingly jeopardizing something that we want to do in the project. We all wanted success on the project, but let's start fresh and see what we can salvage. So having a working relationship that way, which is critical in the sense that it helps you positive criticism, right? It's something that you can build on. So I would definitely recommend, you don't have to own up to the mistake because you don't know where the root cause was in terms of how it happened. But that would be my first step, is just trying to understand where the gap was to begin with, without any name calling and finger pointing. And then seeing how you can salvage what has been built so far in order to extend that further to what the client actually wants. And then making sure that you have a few more touch points, embrace a few more of the Agile concepts, because the faster you kind of build it, test, fail, or build it, test, pass, you would understand that you're taking little steps towards what the client wants, rather than building something as a whole and then realizing that this is not what the client wanted. So that would be my recommendation. I usually find that the client who complains the most are the ones that who give you a lot of opportunities to improve yourself. The ones who always praise, yeah, that's a good thing. That means that you're doing a good job. But the client who never provides you with plus or minus are the ones that you should be most careful about, because they don't really have any feedback for you, and you don't know if you're doing the right thing or the wrong thing, right? So a client who reacts is a good thing. And try to tap into that and use that in a positive way to build the relationship forward.
I agree 100%. It's a learning. What can you learn out of it to do better? And then Michelle has said, thank you for making us think. I'm intrigued to find out more about what my boss does. I hope he does not feel I'm stepping on his toes. God will, I'm not sure if this is related, but based on your experience, how can one progress from BA to a product owner manager space?
Yeah, I think I can take an entire class on this, because I have a lot of personal experiences. I moved into product management in a non-traditional format, so I wouldn't say that I took the traditional route. For starters, I would definitely see if this role is a good match for you. There is certainly a vast difference between being a BA and a product manager. I wouldn't say that BAs don't have that skill set, but definitely this topic of empowerment is a big one if you want to be a product manager. One of the examples that I was giving you, when you are directly a tech manager, developers and testers, they all report to the manager. The BA also reports to that manager. And the manager kind of has that sense of responsibility in terms of the success or failure of what is being done. But as a product manager, you kind of own that responsibility, but without the power, which is where I started thinking a lot more about empowerment as well. And I started thinking about how and why it is important for people, because I personally experienced that. So one of the biggest things that I would ask you to investigate is personality wise, do you feel like you are able to handle the needs as a product manager, because it is slightly different from what you need to do as a BA. So that would be my first thing. The second thing that I would recommend is for non-traditional PM. So if you are a BA and you're moving into the PM type of role, follow some very leading experts in product management on LinkedIn. I personally found that very useful as I was connecting to people. They used to post things about, how do you transition over? What are some of the skills that you need to look into? There are some standard books that are almost looked at as gospel or Bible in terms of, how do you do product management? I would highly encourage you to seek out those books and kind of look at those as well. And maybe, Laura, if it's okay, I can pass some of these materials materials to you if you would like to share it with the audience after the session.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So definitely, I would say leverage LinkedIn as much as possible. There are lots of professionals from the Silicon Valley who are constantly passing their knowledge. Marty Kagan is one of the leading experts in product management. He kind of brought in a lot of those concepts. So if you go on his profile, you kind of look at the content that he's building, look at some of the popular people who are interacting with him or people that he follows. He has also written a couple books, which are, again, gospel, because they kind of look at it and go, oh, these are fresh insights as to how we need to manage product management. And then apart from that, try to find some voluntary experiences in product management as well. I mean, the world has opened up now in terms of digital capacity. So you might be able to find a startup that is interested in bringing you on board on the site just to see how that experience is. There are lots of internship programs that some companies offer, like Shopify, Microsoft, Facebook. All of them have an associate product management internship program. Of course, there's going to be a problem with the financial side. If you have been an established professional, going back to a starting salary might be tough, but those are some of the decisions that you can consider in terms of how you want to start. But I would definitely recommend starting from LinkedIn, read a lot of experiences from other people, understand if it's a good match for your skill set and your personality type, see how the market is in your industry, because I know that product management is a lot more respected in some of the mature agile teams, but when it's brand new in a certain company, you might not actually be doing product management, but they'll call you so. And on the flip side, they might even have roles that actually do product management, but they don't want to pay them the same salary, so they might actually call them by a different title, so they don't have to compete with that same salary level. So there's a fair bit of research that you need to do. So I would recommend starting from LinkedIn, doing your research there, and then making your decision based on that.
Thanks, Banu. Lufuna has a comment here. Awesome presentation. Looking forward to the next one. Komotso has said, one of the key soft skill BA needs is protecting one's self-esteem and self-confidence because it can be very cold out there. How do you manage that and protect it?
It's very interesting you asked that, because in the beginning as a BA myself, I felt that because every document that I was writing, I was like, this is my baby. This is my baby. And it would be like a one-page change request where I would have added 3 lines. And when I went into a meeting and someone decimated it, I was like heartbroken when I came out of the meeting. I think one of the key things that you can do is ensuring that the work that you do is not you, right? The work that you do is a deliverable. I think it's a mindset change on your side too. You do not need to attribute your self-esteem and your self-confidence based on the work that you're delivering. Work is something that evolves. It's always going to be there. You would improve over a period of time. Someone else's perspective on your specific work, take it as critical feedback, whereby if it's truly real, then take that and incorporate that as part of your improvement plan. But if you feel that someone is just saying that out of spite, or maybe it is not true, then you don't need to really take that up on yourself and beat yourself to it. It is also important to be kind to yourself, because we all tend to set higher expectations for ourselves than we do for other people. So always be kind to yourself, know what you need to do, and treat your career just like any other project. One of the key challenges that I discovered with a lot of the mentees that I spoke with during the pandemic was their struggle to find a job. And it can be extremely draining, extremely depressing. It drains your health, it drains your mindset. It really puts you in a very dark place psychologically. But the truth that I told them, or truth be told, and what I shared with them, is that treat every pursuit in your life as a project, and career is also a project. You shouldn't be thinking about your career all the time. Yes, you're working, you have certain goals, and target those goals while you're actually working on them. But you should also know how to unwind and unplug yourself and live your own personal life. And that could be anything from Netflix binge watching, or just walking down the park, or taking your dog out for a walk, whatever it is. You need to be able to connect with yourself as a person. Your job does not define you. It gives you a sense of purpose. It helps you realize your purpose in life and what you're good at, what you're not good at, the social relationships that you build, and so on and so forth. So please protect your self-confidence and your self-esteem from your career, because at the end of the day, the career is something that you're going to be doing to keep yourself busy, but it does not define you. So try to work a bit more on detaching yourself, looking at things in a more tangible manner, in a more professional manner, rather than personalizing everything that you're doing. Passion is different from personalizing. Passion is something that drives you every day. You want to wake up in the morning to look forward to doing this. But it does not mean that without that passion, you are nobody. If this passion goes away, you're going to be finding another passion quite soon. Humans are very good that way. We are able to adapt to change, but you need to give yourself that opportunity to adapt as well. So highly, highly recommend detaching yourself from your work deliverables and taking that time to unwind as well.
Great advice. Thank you. I'm going to skip through to the questions. There's lots of compliments.
Thank you. We can skip those.
As a BA, how critical is it to have in-depth understanding of systems and integration? Do we solely concentrate on the what and not so much the how?
I have two perspectives to this question. I think it depends on where you are positioned as a BA. Now, going in as a business, I've worked on both sides, on the technical side and on the business side. When I was working on the business side, it is highly recommended that you do not talk about the solution at that point, because you're really eliciting what is the why that you're trying to solve? What is the pain point? What is it that they exactly want to do? What is it that the business team has identified as the problem to solve? What is it that you're trying to solve? So that is more of the what and perhaps the why as well, because the why kind of informs the value in doing it, and the value kind of informs perhaps the how as well in some way. So what and why would be the two main questions that I would approach as a business BA being positioned in that space. But when I move to the technical side, if I am interacting with the technical team, it is worthwhile to understand the how as well, because it is possible that the business team did not really want a local instance of the database, because they are looking at a worldwide client base. And in that case, the numbers would be scalable. There'll be more people using the system and so on and so forth. So taking that what and why, the problem itself, bringing it over to the technical team and asking them, how are you going to be solving this problem? We do need a scalable solution. You might want to go with the cloud approach rather than a local instance of the database. So the how kind of only comes into the picture after you've had those conversations of what and why, and then you take them away to the technical team when you are building the solution itself. So I would just stay away from the how in the beginning part of the conversation until you've uncovered what the true problem is and the reason why you're doing it. I wouldn't even go into solutioning. There might be some initial suggestions that come through. There might be some initial things that the client might be super interested in doing. And take note of those, put that as your parking lot, and then you can take those suggestions as brainstorming ideas with your technical team. So I would just be careful, because once you start solutioning in the beginning itself, it can take you down a rabbit hole that, we had an example previously in this chat where clients said they wanted something, they approved it, and then in the end, when we delivered it to them, they said this wasn't even the one that they were looking for. So you can get into that sort of rabbit hole. So I would advise first to do the what and why with the business team, and then get into the how.
100% agree. Just leave the solutioning till much later.
Exactly.
Understand why first. Yeah. Keenan has a question. As a BA, the bird's eye view of the organization is so important. How do you traverse this if the organization is in silos?
Yeah, I would say the answer is coffee chats. Silos. So I personally like this quote of, again, it's a philosophical quote, but I think it applies in organizations as well, is 99.99% people in this world are really good people, hardworking people. They don't hate other people. They don't want wars. They don't want, any kind of violence. But it's the 0.0001% of people who hold the power because of their money or strategic positioning or whatever that is, that cause trouble for the rest of us, right? The rest of us are really fun-loving people. We just want to be safe with our families. We want to be able to do fun stuff in our life. And we don't really care about this political agenda that keeps playing around and plaguing us in a way. Similarly, in organizations, most employees are really happy to share the information. They want to meet other people. They want to chat. They want to help the organization. Like, imagine yourself when you first joined the organization, right? You're bright-eyed, big-eyed, and you want to change all the problems in the world. You want to solve them. But as time goes by, you start absorbing some of the organizational negativity, and you might start, clamping up, and you don't really want to share. So what I would recommend is have informal conversations with these people. Now that we have the power of LinkedIn, you can really find out who else is working in your organization, what sort of teams they're working on, and you have a back channel with them, right? Because you are working in the same organization. You can use your Teams or Google Chat or whatever that is to connect with them and say, hey, I was just curious about this. I work on the side of the team. What do you do? And strike up a conversation and try to bring that insight to yourself. Don't wait for your boss to tell every time. It's like, oh, we have the approval to talk to them, or we have the approval to do this with them. Take that initiative to kind of make that network with them. And this eventually is also going to help you in your career too, because if you realize that someone is working in an interesting area that you would want as well, and you've been having this conversation with them, you're building a rapport with them, imagine what will happen the next time an opening opens up in their department. They're going to act as your ally and saying, hey, this person has been expressing interest for the longest time. They're really good at what they do, and I think they will grow and become better at what they do once they join our organization too. So I definitely recommend informal coffee chats and just randomly buzzing people to find out how things work.
That's great advice. Thank you. Okay, the next one. How can we harness strategic interest with team or supervisors who keep information and connections private?
Very good question. A couple of years ago, I ran into this issue whereby I was dealing with a C-suite executive, and she wasn't very helpful. And then I had found someone on the team who was helping me out. And by the time I got to my fourth favor with that person, they were like, I can't help you anymore because my boss says no. So it's quite common. It happens more often than not. Few things I would recommend is, one, look into what are some of the keywords that they work with. For example, all kinds of learning is available on the internet now. You can check Udemy courses. So if you want to learn something about marketing, there's something out there. If you want to learn something about finance, it's out there. If you want to learn something about IT, it's out there. So if you can glean some buzzwords in terms of what that team actually works with, try to investigate what happens in the industry in general to begin with, right? And once that happens, you might be able to find people in the ecosystem who are connected to this team that's private, but you have the outside view of what that team does. And sometimes by knowing if A is your center and B is feeding something into it, C is feeding something into it, D is feeding something into it, maybe Z is consuming something from it. If you find some friendly people in the other teams that are interacting with this one team, you might be able to piece the puzzle around what they are actually doing in there. And the next time when you meet with them, showing them that you understand the challenges that they go through, showing them that empathy. Somehow negative experiences connect human beings in a more deeper level than positive experiences. So going in with the mindset that, hey, I empathize with you. I know your position is quite tough. I would be going through these challenges when I go through this, and trying to, open them up, identifying what is it that's clamping them. And using some concepts to open them up and making them feel more safe in your presence, and asking questions that does not necessarily ruffle them in the wrong way. I think that's one way of looking at it. That's basically what I did. So I went to Udemy and I tried to Google some stuff that they do on a day-to-day basis, understood some legislations and legalities around there. So the next time when I spoke to them, I sounded more intelligent, and therefore they were more willing to give me that information. I was like, okay, this person understands what I'm saying, and I'm not schooling a kindergarten person.
What advice can you perhaps give on approach for organizational career promotion as a specialist, for example, product BA in technology delivering new products, features for an agile company?
Okay. When you say give on approach for an organizational career promotion, there are some common ways that you can tap into this. I definitely recommend the part where understanding what your boss does. I think that becomes a crucial element because that's sort of your foreshadowing of what you would be doing if you were to move into that role. There are also ways to tap into the same role in other organizations. Like it doesn't have to be the same person in your organization if you want to keep it private until the actual role is offered to you. But you can look at comparable roles in other companies and, connect with them over LinkedIn and ask them what they do and how they do it. They'll be more than happy. People love to talk about themselves, stroke their vanity a bit and tell them how great they are. And you want to get some more information about what needs to be done and so on and so forth. And who knows, maybe, if you show the right kind of interest, and you're talking to this person outside of your organization, even they might become an ally for you to recommend something within their company if you build that relationship and you keep that network alive. The other thing that I would recommend is ask your boss for more responsibilities. If you feel that you have kind of exhausted whatever there is to be done and learned at your level, then ask them for more responsibilities. Say that, hey, I'm interested in learning something more and can you give me these opportunities? So usually when I apply for a job, I try to look at about 60% of the job is something that I already know how to do. And 40% is something that I want to learn. So that way, regardless of what job you go into, you're constantly learning and growing. You don't want to apply for a job where you can do 100% everything that they're offering simply because there are not going to be many growth channels for you. So go for that 60-40 or 70-30, whatever makes you comfortable, right? The end story is that you need something that helps you grow. And once you have been in that role for some time, you will realize that the 30% that you are trying to bridge a gap on is something that you've mastered. Now you're ready to go to the next level. So this is something that you can have as part of your performance management conversations and start asking for little new tasks that you want to keep working on. Even taking some tasks off your manager's plate. For example, status update meetings, those are pretty boring in general. But for someone who's learning, if you start getting the same insight that your boss is getting, so you're literally just sitting in one team, but your boss is managing 5 other teams. But if you take his status reports, all those 5 different updates that your boss usually gets, you're getting. So in a way, you're starting to get that strategic insight about the whole team. You're trying to understand a bit more about his role, how he does things. And perhaps you might not get promoted immediately to your manager's position, but you might get something that's a lateral move at his level. So it's really about building more of your soft skills, your strategic skills, your leadership skills. That's what happens as you're getting promoted. But if there are technical skills, those are easier to grasp because you can take some courses. But the soft skills are the ones that you want to start tapping into and getting in a more practical environment rather than from books.
Thanks, Banu. I think this is the last question.
Okay.
It is challenging to walk in and pick up from where another BA left off after a period of time. The analytical character in me has to reverse engineer at the speed of light and protect a level of confidence in understanding the solution. I think that's project, right? Some tips to balance?
Yes. This is one of my favorite topics as well, because if you look at my LinkedIn profile, I'm on my 11th or 12th job since I graduated, and I moved around quite a bit simply because I wanted to learn different techniques, different skills. It goes back to my value of empathy and understanding people in what they do. And one of the key things that I used to do is talk to the customers of the system or product that I'm managing. Often when you're going in, history is important. Understanding where things are is important, but it's also important to know what are the key issues or challenges that you're facing or your product is facing or your department is facing. And when you do that, you kind of gain that insight quite quickly. Once you know this seems to be the biggest pain point, when you're reading these documents that you're trying to catch up, your eyes will automatically pick up on some tools and techniques, some tools and tips in the document to say, oh, this person talked about this. It seems to be highlighted here. This person talked about this. This seems to be highlighted here. So it's a personal exercise of prioritization. So listen to customer support, complaints, compliments. Those are a great source to understand what your product is doing, what your application is doing. Talking directly to your stakeholders and understanding what their what are the things that drive them, right? And in this case, I wouldn't recommend going with a clean slate to a senior stakeholder and going, hey, so can you tell me a bit more about yourself? That's not what I'm asking you to do, but maybe use some back channels to see what are some of the other people who have interacted with the stakeholder, understand their personality, understand what drives them, and so on and so forth. And then take a professional view of how they are, and then go chat with them as well. I find that talking to people directly in interviews gives you a lot more insight, because that's what you would be using a lot more as a BA in managing people's personalities, rather than what's written in a document, because that you can always catch up on a light night reading or something like that. But the people's personalities is what will help you take you forward, because you've built that relationship with them. You can tell them that you're new, and always use your I'm new card, right? That is the time when people are most compliant, they're more gentle with you. They're like, okay, you're still new, you're getting used to this, so don't worry about it. Versus if you're 6 months in the job, they're like, you should be knowing about this by now. So play the I'm new card as long as you can, and as often as you can in those first few months, and try to get as much detail as possible. It's about you being as genuine as possible as well. So if you genuinely tell them, at least it has worked for me. I've been fortunate enough. There was 1 or 2 scenarios where it was bad, but that doesn't sum up my entire experience of the I'm new card. But yeah, generally people are quite helpful as long as you're respectful of their time. Be prepared in these meetings, and try to do initial research, whether that be through their LinkedIn profile. When you read the documents, you will notice where they have actually provided specific feedbacks. I think with the electronic document management, you can see where the comments have been posted and who has posted them. So those are some of the ways that I would kind of ramp up, is to start with people's personalities, build those relationships, then start using your I'm new card and have some coffee chats with people. And then you can kind of use the document review as an overarching journey that keeps going through as you're reading and reviewing those notes.
Thanks, Banu. Okay, I lied. There is one more question. Is BA Center of Excellence still relevant in an Agile organization?
Yes, I do think so. And the reason is because it's almost like saying, hey, most of the people are working in technology, and we're not necessarily using engineering concepts. So should we still go to engineering school, right? I think it's a combination of theory and practical. I didn't do my BA certification, or I didn't write the exam until my 5th year of being a BA, I think. And prior to that, I was just learning things on the go. I was learning practical things. And when I read the book and I looked at some of the tools and techniques, it just helped me inform a lot more. You cannot have just one area to focus on. You cannot just be theoretical. You can't just be practical. I think both of them need to go hand in hand. The second thing I wanted to mention is that IIBA is constantly updating their details as well. For example, how do you do business analysis in an Agile world? Thinking about data analysis as well. So all these things are now coming into the umbrella of being a business analyst. And I think even being a BA, the definition of being a BA has changed, and IIBA is keeping up with the trends and changes that are happening. So I definitely recommend that. It's still valuable, but the key thing that I want to mention is you will get what you aim to get from it. So you have to understand what your needs are, and that requires active self-awareness of where you are in your skill set and what are the gaps that you're trying to address. And when you go with that view and intent to IIBA, you'll find relevant material for what you need, rather than just swallowing everything that they're throwing at you, because that's not going to help. Going back to one of the comments that I made in the presentation is knowledge is power when it's applied in the right context at the right time. It's not just sufficient to memorize the entire Babok, but it's really key to understand what you need to pull out at what point in time. So in my opinion, it's still relevant, but it's only relevant to the goals that you have set for yourself.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, someone has asked about your book, Banu.
Yes, I can send that link over. I was actually a co-author. It's a bunch of entrepreneurial women who wrote different essays, and mine was specifically on empathy on leadership. But yes, I can share the link for sure.
That's great. Thanks, Banu. Right, I think that's all the questions.
Amazing.
Thank you so much. As always, insightful and engaging and very interesting, Banu. Thank you so much for sharing with us. It was really
of course, Yeah. Thank you for having me too. I appreciate this. And this was one of the most engaging audience, lots of interesting questions. You made me draw out my passion. So
fantastic. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
yes.
Come back again. Yes. Have a good evening further. Thanks everybody for joining. Thanks, Banu.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.